In a vibrant but challenging Burkina Faso, where youth unemployment is reaching alarming heights, a press conference is taking place in a crowded room of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, a colonial building with weather-whitened walls and high windows letting in the golden light of an October 2024 afternoon. Journalists, armed with microphones and cameras, crowd around a podium where President Ibrahim Traoré, 37, prepares to answer questions. Dressed in his impeccably pressed khaki military uniform, with a red beret tilted to one side, he exudes a natural authority, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that betrays both his determination and his fatigue. The cameras flash and the air is saturated with the hum of conversation and the clatter of pens on notebooks. Outside, the city comes alive. The clatter of motorcycles echoes through the dusty streets. Mango vendors shout their prices, and children play ball under the scorching sun, their laughter persisting the tense atmosphere. Inside, the atmosphere is electric, as Traoré, known for his military leadership and fiery speeches against imperialism, is under pressure. Criticism of his economic management is mounting, and young people in particular feel forgotten. Suddenly, a clear, vibrant voice cuts through the ground-shaking din. "Mr. President, why are you ignoring young people?" A young woman, Aisha, 22, stands at the back of the room, her eyes bright with anger and despair. Dressed in worn jeans and a white t-shirt emblazoned with a slogan in red, "Youth is the future." She clutches a notebook to her chest, her hastily traced hair falling tightly over her shoulders. Journalists turn to her, cameras swivel, and a murmur runs through the crowd. Aisha, an economics graduate from the University of Ouagadougou, has become a rising figure on TikTok, where her videos denouncing youth unemployment have amassed thousands of views. "My friends have no future here," she continues, her voice trembling with emotion. "They're leaving for Mali, the Ivory Coast, or Pyrenees, joining the insurgents out of desperation. You talk about security, but you don't give us a reason to stay." The soft words resound like a thunderclap, and an icy silence settles in. Traoré, motionless, stares at her for a long moment, his face impassive, but his eyes betray a gleam of intrigue. He raises a hand to quiet the murmurs, then, in a deep, poised voice, answers, "Mademoiselle, come and see me afterwards. We'll talk." An hour later, Aisha stands in front of the massive door to the presidential office, her fingers nervously clutching her notebook. A uniformed guard, an imposing man with a stern gaze, beckons her in. The room is a sanctuary of power and history. The walls are covered with faded portraits of former presidents, their gaze seemingly weighing on every decision taken here. A carved wooden clock, a gift from a traditional chieftain, ticks steadily, and a huge bavitray offers a view over Ouagadougou, where the roofs of roofing tiles soak up the setting sun. A massive acajou desk sits in the center, covered with files, maps, and a small bronze statuette of a Burkinabe horseman, a symbol of courage that Traoré always keeps close to him. He is seated in a leather armchair, his beret resting on the desk, and he invites her to sit down with a wave of his hand. Aisha, intimidated by the aura of the man she has publicly challenged, takes her place on a wooden chair, her trembling hands resting on her knees. "Speak, Aisha," says Traoré, his voice soft but firm, a striking contrast to his military appearance. "I want to hear what you have to say." Aisha inhales deeply, the scent of old wood and leather creasing her centerine, and begins to speak, her voice at first hesitant, then increasingly assured. "Mr. President, I've got a degree in economics, but I don't have a job, and neither do my friends. We have dreams, but here they're dying out. I grew up in a small village near Dédougou where my mother sold peanuts at the market to pay for my studies. I promised to make her proud again, but I can't." She opens her notebook, showing pages full of figures and testimonies she has collected. "Look, 60% of young people in my neighborhood have dropped out for lack of means. Many have migrated, and those who remain are joining armed groups, not by choice, but out of desperation. Her eyes amber with tears, and she bows her head, her voice breaking. You talk about fighting terrorism, but if you don't give young people a reason to stay, how can you win this war? Traoré listens in silence, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk, a tic he has when he's deep in thought. Aisha's words awaken buried memories, images he'd almost forgotten. He remembers being 20 years old, a student at the University of Ouagadougou, militant in student associations, organizing sit-ins to demand more grants and better conditions. He remembers one night, sitting under a mango tree with his classmates, discussing their dream for Burkina Faso, a country where every young person would have a chance to succeed. But he also remembers the years that followed, his entry into the army, the fighting in the Sahel, and the faces of the young people who saw him join the insurgents, their eyes empty of hope. Aisha, he says at last, his voice tinged with a rare emotion. I understand your frustration. I grew up in a village near Koudougou, where dreams were rare. My father was a farmer and my mother wove baskets to feed us. I saw the misery and vowed to change things. But we're at war, and every resource is mobilized to protect our nation. Aisha sinks her head, her tears flowing freely now. Protect, yes, but at what price? We young people are your future, not just soldiers in waiting. You must give us a chance, a real chance, not empty promises. A heavy silence settles in, disturbed only by the ticking of the clock and the chirping of a bird outside. Traoré stands up, walks slowly towards the bay window and places a hand against the cold glass. His breath forms a light mist. He looks out over the city, its bustling streets and colorful markets, and thinks of the thousands of young people like Aisha who are waiting for a sign, a hope. You're right, he says. Does he murmur? Almost to himself before turning to her. We need to do more. Tell me, Aisha, what ideas do you have to help young people? Aisha, surprised by this opening, wipes away her tears and straightens up, her voice regaining new strength. We need vocational training, subsidies for startups and partnerships with local businesses. But above all, we need to feel that you're listening to us, that you believe in us. Traoré nods, sitting down again and picking up a blank sheet of paper and a pen. I see. And how can we get young people involved in designing these programs? Aisha, encouraged by his proposing tone, creates a youth advisory council where we can share our ideas directly with you. We want to be actors in our future, not just spectators. Traoré scribbles notes, his eyebrows dark with concentration. That's an excellent idea, he says, a slight smile forming on his lips. And if I asked you to be part of this council, would you accept? Aisha, abasourdie, remains silent for a moment, then nods, a mixture of fear and excitement in her eyes. Yes, Mr. President, it would be an honor. Traoré stands up, holding out his hand. So, Aisha, let's work together. I want you to be at the heart of this change. Will you help me build this future? Aisha, tears flowing again, but this time from joy, shakes his hand forcefully. Yes, Mr. President? Thank you for listening to me. They exchange a look, silent impacts sealed in this room where so many historic decisions have been made. And for the first time, Aisha feels that hope is no longer an empty word. The following days are a whirlwind of activity. Traoré assembles his cabinet in a meeting room with a wall covered in maps and charts. The air is thick with the smell of coffee and the attention of debate. He announces the launch of a national youth employment program, Bâtissez Avenir Burkina, which will include vocational training, subsidies for startups and partnerships with local businesses. But the proposal is meeting with resistance. An elderly, stubbly minister, a man with graying hair and a stern gaze, objects. Mr. President, we already have debts. This program is ambitious, but if we fail, it could discredit us. He replies with a firmness that silences the room. Failure is not an option. These young people are our shield against despair, against terrorism. If we don't give them hope, who will? They point to Aisha, sitting on the sidelines, anxiously observing the scene. This young woman has opened my eyes. She will be our ambassador for this program. Murmurs rise. Traoré raises a hand, imposing silence. We begin now. Aisha, now an ambassador for Avenir Burkina, embarks on her mission with boundless energy. She travels around the country, visiting villages and towns, meeting young people to gather their ideas and needs. In Bobo Dioulasso, she stops off at a dilapidated community center where some 30 young people are waiting for her, seated on wooden benches under a rusty tin roof. The air is heavy, saturated with the smell of dry earth and ripe mangoes stacked in a corner. Samba, a 19-year-old boy with his arm crossed and a wary look on his face, speaks up. How can you be sure it's going to work? We've heard promises before and nothing's changed. Aisha sits down next to him, resting her notebook on her lap. I understand your doubts, Samba, she says gently. I had doubts too, but the president listened to me, and now we have a chance. Give us a chance to prove that we can make a difference. She shares her story, telling how she grew up in a village near Dédougou, where her mother sold peanuts to pay for her schooling, and how she almost gave up her dreams. The youngsters, touched by her sincerity, start asking questions, suggesting ideas, and soon, laughter and bursts of voices fill the room. Months go by, and the results of Burkina's future begin to show. Training centers open all over the country, their walls painted green and red, the colors of the Burkinab flag becoming symbols of hope. In Ouagadougou, a mechanics training center attracts dozens of young people, their hands covered in grease as they repair engines under the watchful eye of a trainer. In Koudougou, a young woman named Aminata, 24, opens a sewing store thanks to a grant from the program. Her fingers knit colorful sponge cousins, which she sells at the local market. A video of Aminata, shared on TikTok, goes viral. She stands in front of her store, a bright smile on her face, and tells the camera, "Thanks to Burkina in the future, I can feed my family." Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Mr. President. The video was viewed thousands of times, and soon young people from all over the country began posting their own testimonials, showing their workshops, their store, their dream come true. But the road is not without obstacles. In Ouagadougou, Traoré faces growing criticism from some of his political opponents, who accuse the program of being a publicity stunt. At a tense meeting with his advisors, he had to defend his vision. It's not a question of image, he insists, his voice rising. It's a question of survival. If we don't give these young people a future, they will become our enemies. They show a report on the first results. 500 young people trained in 3 months, 50 startups created, and a drop in outmigration in certain regions. We're on the right track, he concludes, and his advisors, convinced, nod their heads, although some are still muttering their doubts. Aisha, for her part, continues her work, but she also faces personal challenges. During a visit to the Dougou, she returns to her native village where her mother Fatimata greets her with a tired but proud smile. Sitting under a mango tree, she shares a meal of rates and sauce with Rashid, the familiar smell taking Aisha back to her childhood. "I'm proud of you, girl," Fatimata says, her mangy hands caressing Aisha's addition. "But be careful. Power attracts enemies." Aisha nods, aware of the rumors circulating. Some accuse her of being a puppet of Traoré, others threaten her on social networks, but she refuses to be intimidated. "I'm doing this for us, Mom," she whispers, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun sets, painting the sky in orange hues. The climax of the story comes at a grand ceremony in Bobo Dioulasso, 6 months after the initial meeting between Traoré and Aisha. A huge crowd gathered in a central square under a brilliant blue sky. Green and red flags flutter in a tepid breeze. Children run between the legs of adults, their laughter mingling with the field of griots set up on a makeshift platform. Their voices prowl, celebrating the heroes of the present. Traoré climbs onto a platform, dressed in a traditional white tunic, a symbol of renewal, and takes the microphone. "People of Burkina Faso," he begins, his voice sounding like benevolent thunder. "Today we celebrate our youth, our future." Aisha opened my eyes, and together we built Avenir Burkina. This program is not an end, but a beginning. We will continue to listen, to build, to dream. The crowd erupts in cheers. Hands are raised to the sky, and tears stream down faces scarred by years of struggle. Aisha, standing next to Traoré, takes the microphone in turn, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you, Mr. President," she says, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You have listened, and now we believe in you. To all the young people here, I want to say, never give up. We are the future, and together we can change everything." The crowd roars, chanting his name, and young people hold up placards that read, "Aisha, our voice, and Avenir Burkina, our hope." Traoré looks out over the crowd and whispers to Aisha, "This is the beginning, Aisha. Together, we can change our destiny." She smiles, confident, and the camera pulls away, showing the Burkinabe flags waving in the wind, symbol of a reborn future. But the story doesn't end there. A few days later, Traoré and Aisha meet one last time in the presidential office where it all began. The room is bathed in the soft light of dusk, the shadows of portraits dancing on the walls. Aisha, now more at ease, asks a question that has haunted her for months. "Mr. President, how did you find the strength to change, to listen?" Traoré, his eyes lost in the distance, answers after a long silence. "It's you, the young people, who give me this strength. You are our future, and I don't want to disappoint you." They exchange a glance, a bond forged in common struggle, and the camera fades to their silhouettes, bathed in the orange light of the setting sun, while the ticking of their dressing room continues, a reminder that time, like hope, never stands still.